Now, in a first on CNBC interview, is the chairman of the House Subcommittee investigating the slow recall.
Yeah, that is Representative Tim Murphy, the Republican from Pennsylvania, joining us right now. Congressman, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Why specifically are you calling this hearing now? Why are you investigating?
Well, we see that apparently GM was aware, or maybe they weren't aware of some problems. We heard a top GM executive said their reporting system was not sufficiently robust. But NHTSA had also been looking at this issue for a number of years, but concluded a couple years ago there was not enough information to move forward. But we do know that 13 deaths have occurred, many accidents, and thousands of consumer complaints. There's a very, very important law passed in 2000 which requires manufacturers to inform NHTSA in an early warning system that problems that dealers report, warranties are out there, consumer complaints. And we have asked NHTSA to tell us what have they been hearing over the years? What have they communicated with General Motors? Right. What have they heard back? And we need to find out in a very factual-based way what has been occurring.
You're always going to get people complaining about a vehicle. You're always going to have, tragically, accidents that can result in death. But at what point does an automaker have to restrain production of a vehicle or do the recall when it becomes, even before it becomes clear that there is something fundamentally wrong with that vehicle? I mean, that's really what's getting to the core of this right now. It took them time to figure this out, they say, when there are those who say it took 10 years to do that.
Well, they were focusing on the Chevy Cobalt, as I understand. When General Motors also added a Saturn vehicle, Pontiac vehicle, suddenly those numbers jumped up to 13 deaths. We don't know if that was part of the issue. They really were compartmentalizing the information and not looking at an aggregate. We don't know if they were looking at the proper trends in this. And these are all questions that we have to ask NHTSA. How were they looking at data? How do they analyze this? What conclusions do they draw? Who did this? And were they properly communicating with GM? Was GM being properly honest and straightforward in all of their things, too? So that's why we have this investigation. We're going to do it very fact-based, very deliberative, very careful, but to get to the bottom of this is essential.
And Representative Murphy, you raised the issue about NHTSA. There are two different places where there could have been oversight or something done to prevent these deaths and these incidents, and that is one from the automaker itself, GM, of course, and the other from the government. And what we know from NHTSA and from the New York Times piece over the weekend is that their argument is basically, look, this was a very small number of vehicles. So, you know, unfortunately, it wasn't big enough, frankly, for us to spend resources on. I'm paraphrasing. But if that's, in fact, their argument, what do you do in that kind of situation where, granted, there are a limited number of resources to investigate every complaint?
Exactly.
Well, what has happened is NHTSA has just sent a list of 107 questions to General Motors. Those are going to take some time and volume to explain that. But along those lines, I mean, it is a very important question. Why 10 years? What information was out there? Did it get pigeonholed somewhere because they thought it was a very small number? Or were there trends emerging that if someone had taken another careful look at this data, they would have seen something? This is the same if a doctor overlooks some lab tests and misses a diagnosis. Let's go back over this. And was the proper reporting coming from General Motors, not just for the Cobalt, but from some other cars that they made as well that had a similar ignition system that also had problems? In the aggregate, then, the numbers may be there, but let's get the facts.
All right, Congressman, we'd like to have you listen to something that we heard yesterday on this program. These are the parents of an accident victim.
The regulatory agency, they don't seem to have any authority or influence over what the GM does. They sent some kind of report that didn't state anything to our attorney, didn't give any details. And basically how he summed it up was like they're telling us, if you think there was a problem, you prove it.
Congressman?
Well, it's sad. I mean, to put this all on the burden of the consumer is a bit of a problem. The reason the NHTSA is there, and the reason the early warning alert system was put in with NHTSA in the 2000 law, the TREAD Act, was for this very reason, to give the consumer more strength and to have the government really looking out for the citizens along these lines so that you didn't have any kind of untoward action on the part of a company. I'm not saying General Motors had some problems with their reporting system, but what the government's supposed to be doing is working with constituents, with taxpayers to find out, was the information really being out there? They should have listened.
Representative Murphy, nice to see you. Thank you for your time, sir. Let us know what you find. Would you come back and tell us?
We will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.